It was the summer of 1971 when Roger and Carolyn Perron, along with their 5 daughters, arrived at their new home, a sprawling, weathered farmhouse nestled in the secluded woods of Harrisville, Rhode Island. The family was excited for a fresh start, oblivious to the horrors that awaited them within those walls. The first few days passed peacefully, but the tranquility soon gave way to an ominous presence. Strange occurrences began subtly. A door creaking open on its own, faint whispers in the dead of night, and the clocks mysteriously stopping at exactly 3:07 a.m. The youngest daughter, April, was the first to notice the peculiarities. She spoke of an imaginary friend named Rory, who she claimed lived in the house. Her parents dismissed it as childish imagination, but when Carolyn woke up one morning with unexplained bruises on her arms, the family started to suspect that something sinister was at play. The dogs, once playful and energetic, began to growl at unseen entities, their hair bristling in fear. One evening, as the family sat together in the living room, they heard a loud crash from the basement. Roger grabbed a flashlight and ventured down the creaky stairs, finding nothing but overturned furniture and scattered objects. A chilling draft enveloped him, sending shivers down his spine. The next morning, Carolyn discovered a hidden room behind a wooden panel in the basement, a space filled with strange relics and an old, rotting noose hanging from the rafters. As the days turned into weeks, the haunting grew more aggressive. Furniture moved on its own, disembodied laughter echoed through the halls, and the children began waking up screaming, claiming they were being pulled from their beds by unseen hands. Carolyn, desperate and terrified, sought help from local clergy, but their prayers seemed to anger the presence rather than calm it. It wasn't long before the name Bathsheba began to surface, a dark, malevolent force tied to the land, rumored to have been a witch in the 1800s who sacrificed her own child to the devil. Carolyn started to see her in fleeting, horrifying visions. A gaunt woman with hollow eyes, her face twisted in malice. The Perrons were desperate. Their once idyllic dream home had turned into a nightmare, and they knew they couldn't face this entity alone. That's when Carolyn, after hearing whispers of their extraordinary work, reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the renowned paranormal investigators. Little did the Perrons know, their plea for help would lead to one of the most harrowing battles between good and evil ever documented. The Warrens arrived at the Perron farmhouse on a stormy evening, their presence bringing an air of cautious hope to the tormented family. Ed Warren, a no-nonsense demonologist, and Lorraine, a gifted clairvoyant, immediately sensed the oppressive atmosphere. The house seemed to breathe with malevolence. Shadows loomed unnaturally long, and an icy chill clung to every corner. As the family recounted their horrifying experiences, Lorraine's expressions grew darker. She described seeing faint, ghostly figures lurking in the periphery of the room, their mournful whispers filling the air. The Warrens began their investigation with a walkthrough of the house. Lorraine's psychic abilities quickly locked onto the basement, the epicenter of the malevolent energy. As she descended into the dark, musty room, she gasped and clutched Ed's arm, her eyes wide with terror. She described a vision of a woman, Bathsheba Sherman, standing on a wooden crate, a noose tightening around her neck as she cursed anyone who dared to live on the land. Bathsheba's spirit, filled with rage and hatred, had bound itself to the house, tormenting the living as retribution for her tragic death. The Warrens set up their equipment, including cameras, audio recorders, and temperature sensors, to document the haunting. It didn't take long for the house to respond. Doors slammed shut with thunderous force, lights flickered violently, and a chilling growl emanated from nowhere. In the children's bedroom, Lorraine watched in horror as a heavy dresser slid across the floor, pinning one of the Perron daughters against the wall. She screamed, her cries mingling with the guttural laughter that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. Over the next few nights, the Warrens uncovered layers of the house's dark history. Bathsheba had been a practitioner of black magic, accused of sacrificing her infant child to Satan before hanging herself in the farmhouse. She cursed the land, ensuring no family would ever find peace. Lorraine discovered that Bathsheba wasn't alone. The house was a portal, drawing in other spirits, all trapped and twisted by her evil influence. One night, Lorraine decided to confront Bathsheba directly in the basement. As she stood in the middle of the room, her rosary clutched tightly, the temperature plummeted, and the air became thick with the stench of sulfur. Suddenly, an unseen force hurled her against the wall, leaving her gasping for air. Ed rushed to her side, his own faith unwavering, as he commanded the entity to reveal itself. A shadowy figure materialized, its hollow eyes burning with hatred, before vanishing into the darkness with an ear-splitting scream. As the activity escalated, Bathsheba's malevolence began targeting Carolyn. She was found sleepwalking, speaking in an unknown language, her body covered in scratches that appeared spontaneously. Lorraine confirmed their worst fear. Bathsheba was attempting to possess Carolyn to continue her legacy of destruction. The Warrens knew that a simple blessing would not suffice. An exorcism was their only chance to save the family. The stage was set for an intense spiritual battle, one that would test the limits of their courage, faith, and strength. The parents prayed it wouldn't come too late, as Bathsheba's hold on Carolyn grew stronger with each passing hour. As the Warrens prepared for the grueling task ahead, the Perron family clung to the hope that their nightmare would soon end. But Bathsheba, sensing the looming threat, unleashed her fury in a terrifying escalation. The farmhouse became a theater of chaos, each corner pulsating with malevolence. Furniture flew across rooms with violent force, windows shattered without cause, and blood-curdling screams reverberated through the halls. Though no one was present, Carolyn's condition worsened. Her eyes often glazed over, her voice a guttural growl, and her movements erratic, as if she were being controlled by an unseen puppet master. The Warrens assembled a small team of assistants, including a priest named Father Gordon, to conduct the exorcism. Before starting, Lorraine warned the family about the gravity of the ritual. "This will provoke her," she said, her voice trembling. "She'll fight harder to keep what she believes is hers." Despite their fear, the parents agreed they had no other choice. The exorcism was planned for midnight, the hour when Bathsheba's power was believed to be at its peak. The family was instructed to stay in the living room, where they huddled together, reciting prayers. Ed, Lorraine, Father Gordon, and the assistants descended into the basement, where Bathsheba's presence was strongest. The room was eerily silent, the air heavy with a foreboding stillness. Candles flickered as Father Gordon began the rite, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. As the Latin prayers echoed through the basement, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. A deafening roar erupted from the darkness, shaking the foundation of the house. Bathsheba's apparition appeared, her ghastly figure emerging from the shadows, her face twisted into a grotesque sneer. "Leave my home," she shrieked, her voice an unnatural cacophony that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The temperature plummeted, and an icy wind swirled around the room, extinguishing the candles. Carolyn's screams tore through the silence above, pulling Lorraine's attention. "She's upstairs," Lorraine cried, rushing back to the living room. There, she found Carolyn levitating several feet above the ground, her body contorted unnaturally, her mouth emitting a guttural, inhuman growl. The Warrens' assistants tried to pull her down, but an invisible force flung them backward, slamming them into the walls. Lorraine knelt by Carolyn, clutching her rosary tightly as she whispered prayers. Back in the basement, Ed and Father Gordon intensified their efforts. The entity's wrath was tangible, objects flew across the room, and the walls oozed a dark, viscous liquid that reeked of decay. Bathsheba's apparition lunged at Father Gordon, but Ed stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. "In the name of God, I command you to leave," he shouted, holding up a crucifix. Bathsheba let out a blood-curdling scream as her form began to dissolve into a thick, black smoke. Upstairs, Lorraine sensed the shift. Carolyn's body dropped to the floor with a thud, her breathing shallow but steady. Bathsheba's grip had weakened, but Lorraine knew this was only the beginning. "She's not gone," she warned. "She's retreating, but she'll strike again." Exhausted and shaken, the Warrens and the Perrons regrouped. They had survived the night, but the battle was far from over. The house still hummed with an unnatural energy, and Bathsheba's rage had not been fully vanquished. Ed and Lorraine began devising a plan for the final confrontation, knowing it would take every ounce of their strength and faith to rid the Perrons of this relentless evil once and for all. The Perrons barely had a moment to breathe before the activity resumed with even greater ferocity. It was as though Bathsheba, though momentarily driven back, had returned more determined to destroy the family. Doors slammed throughout the house, phantom footsteps echoed in the dead of night, and every clock in the farmhouse stopped at precisely 3:07 a.m., the exact time Bathsheba had died. The Warrens decided to spend the next 48 hours at the Perron house to document every manifestation. Lorraine kept a journal of the events, describing visions that grew more vivid and horrifying. "She's showing me things," Lorraine confided to Ed one evening. "Sacrifices, blood rituals. She's tied to this land, but she wasn't the first. Something older lingers here, something darker." That night, as the family tried to sleep, an oppressive silence blanketed the house. The Warrens, stationed in the living room, sat alert, their equipment ready. At 3:07 a.m., a bone-chilling wail erupted from the basement, shaking the entire house. Ed grabbed his flashlight, and Lorraine followed closely behind, clutching her rosary. They descended the stairs, each step heavier than the last. In the basement, the air was suffocatingly thick, as though the very walls were alive. Their equipment malfunctioned, cameras cutting to static and EMF meters spiking erratically. Suddenly, Bathsheba's ghostly figure appeared, hovering near the old wooden crate where she had taken her life. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her voice hissed through the room. "You cannot take what's mine," she screamed, her form twisting grotesquely as she charged toward Ed and Lorraine. Lorraine quickly recited a prayer, and the entity recoiled, her shriek piercing enough to rattle the foundations. But the distraction came at a cost. Upstairs, Carolyn began screaming uncontrollably. Bathsheba's grip on her was growing stronger, threatening to fully possess her. The Warrens rushed back upstairs to find Carolyn writhing on the floor, her face pale and her eyes darkened, as if another presence looked out from within her. The children clung to Roger, terrified as their mother's body contorted unnaturally. Lorraine knelt beside her, reaching out to touch her forehead, but an unseen force threw her across the room. "This is it," Ed said gravely. "We have to perform the exorcism now." Father Gordon was called in once again, this time with the full knowledge that the ritual would either save Carolyn or cost them all their lives. The house erupted into chaos as the exorcism began. Windows shattered, furniture levitated, and Bathsheba's voice filled the air, cursing the Warrens and the family. As the exorcism intensified, Carolyn began to levitate, her body twisting as Bathsheba fought to retain control. Lorraine, in a desperate attempt, reached out psychically, confronting Bathsheba in the spiritual realm. She saw the entity's tragic past, the sacrifices, the betrayal, the curse, but also the unrelenting hatred that consumed her. "You have no power here," Lorraine said firmly, her voice cutting through the cacophony. "You are bound by your hatred, but it's time to let go." Bathsheba screamed, her form splintering into shadowy fragments. Ed, wielding his crucifix, commanded, "In the name of God, leave this family." A brilliant light filled the room, and Bathsheba's presence was torn away, dissipating into nothingness. Carolyn collapsed to the floor, unconscious but alive. The house fell eerily silent. The oppressive energy was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost peaceful. Lorraine, exhausted but relieved, turned to Ed. "It's over," she whispered. The Perrons, though shaken, finally felt hope return to their lives. The Warrens assured them that the malevolence had been banished, though the scars of the ordeal would remain forever etched in their memories. But as the Warrens packed their equipment, Lorraine paused, her gaze lingering on the house. "This isn't the last time we'll face something like this," she murmured. "There are always more shadows waiting." The Perron farmhouse felt calm in the days following the exorcism, but the Warrens knew better than to assume victory. While Bathsheba's malevolent grip on Carolyn had been severed, The house still bore an aura of unease, as if remnants of its dark past lingered just beneath the surface. The family began to rebuild their lives, trying to reclaim their home, but strange occurrences continued, less violent, but no less unsettling. Doors would creak open on their own, cold spots would appear without explanation, and faint whispers would echo in the empty rooms. Ed and Lorraine decided to delve deeper into the history of the land, suspecting that Bathsheba's curse might be part of something far older and far more sinister. They combed through old records, town archives, and church documents, piecing together a chilling tapestry of horror. The land the farmhouse stood on had been the site of witch trials in the 1600s, long before Bathsheba's time. Many accused witches had been executed there, their blood soaking into the soil, and one in particular, a woman named Abigail Kane, had cursed the land with her dying breath. Lorraine's visions grew more vivid as she connected with the house's dark energy. One night, as she meditated in the living room, she was thrust into a harrowing vision. She saw Abigail Kane, bound and burned alive by an angry mob. As the flames consumed her, Abigail uttered a curse that rippled through time. "This land shall never know peace, for I curse it with my pain, my rage, and my soul." When Lorraine awoke, she was trembling. "It's not just Bathsheba," she told Ed. "She was a pawn, a puppet of something much darker. Abigail's curse runs deeper than we imagined. Bathsheba's evil fed off that energy. But it's far from over." The Warrens returned to the farmhouse, this time prepared for a battle far greater than they had anticipated. They brought with them an arsenal of holy relics, blessed objects, and the support of Father Gordon, who had agreed to consecrate the land itself. As night fell, the house came alive with activity. Shadows danced along the walls, whispers grew louder, and an icy wind swept through the halls. Abigail's presence made itself known, her spectral figure towering over the Warrens as she confronted them. Unlike Bathsheba, Abigail exuded a cold, calculating malice. She spoke directly to Lorraine, her voice echoing through the house. "You cannot undo what has been done. This land is mine, and all who dwell here shall suffer." The ritual began, with Father Gordon blessing the farmhouse room by room. Abigail's fury intensified, manifesting in violent tremors that shook the walls. Objects flew through the air, and the Perrons, huddled together, prayed desperately for salvation. Lorraine, reaching out psychically, tried to connect with Abigail's spirit, seeking a way to break the curse. In her vision, Lorraine found herself standing in a spectral version of the farmhouse, surrounded by the echoes of those who had suffered under Abigail's curse. She saw the Perron children, Bathsheba's victims, and countless others trapped in a cycle of torment. "You don't have to hold on to this pain," Lorraine pleaded. "Let it go. Find peace." But Abigail only laughed, her form twisting and growing until she towered over Lorraine. "I am pain," she hissed. "I am rage. You cannot destroy what I have become." Ed's voice broke through the vision, calling Lorraine back to the present. "We need you," he urged, clutching the crucifix tightly. Lorraine snapped out of the trance, her resolve steeled. She took the rosary from her neck and began to pray aloud, her voice steady and unwavering. The house trembled as Abigail's spirit resisted, but the combined prayers of Ed, Lorraine, and Father Gordon began to weaken her hold. A brilliant light filled the room as Abigail's form began to fracture, her screams echoing into the night. "This isn't the end," she snarled before dissolving into the ether. The house fell silent. The curse was broken, and the Perrons, for the first time in years, felt true peace. Lorraine, exhausted but triumphant, turned to Ed. "We've done all we can here," she said softly, "but there will always be more like her." Waiting in the dark, the Warrens left the Perron family with a final blessing, ensuring the house would remain protected. As they drove away, Lorraine glanced back at the farmhouse, her heart heavy but hopeful. The battle was over, but the war against darkness would continue. The Perrons never forgot the Warrens' courage, nor did they forget the terror they had endured. The farmhouse became a quiet, somber reminder of the thin line between the living and the dead, and the power of love and faith to conquer even the darkest of evils. The days after Abigail's banishment were a fragile period for the Perron family. Although the immediate terror seemed to have abated, the scars of their ordeal lingered. The house felt lighter, yet it still carried an eerie stillness, as though holding its breath. Ed and Lorraine Warren believed they had done all they could, but they remained uneasy. The land's history, marked by centuries of pain and suffering, suggested that the darkness might return, stronger and more vengeful. As the Warrens prepared to leave Rhode Island, Lorraine was struck by an unshakable sense of foreboding. In her dreams, she saw flashes of the farmhouse engulfed in shadows, its walls echoing with tortured cries. She decided to revisit the site one last time, against Ed's better judgment. "If there's even a chance that something was left undone," she said, "we can't walk away." The Perrons were hesitant but agreed to let the Warrens return. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the farmhouse seemed to transform. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and the air grew thick with an oppressive chill. The Warrens set up their equipment, placing cameras, motion sensors, and holy relics throughout the house. This time, they were prepared for the unexpected. As the clock struck midnight, the house erupted in chaos. Doors slammed, windows shattered, and an unseen force tossed furniture across the rooms. The Perrons, huddled in the living room, clung to one another as the temperature plummeted. Lorraine was overcome by a vision so powerful it brought her to her knees. In her mind's eye, she saw the land as it was centuries ago, a dense forest where rituals were performed under the moonlight. She saw Abigail Kane not as a victim, but as a willing servant of a far darker force. Abigail had pledged herself to an ancient entity, one that demanded blood sacrifices to maintain its power. Lorraine realized that Abigail had been merely the herald of this greater evil, and the ritual they had performed weeks ago had only scratched the surface. Ed's voice cut through her vision as he shouted, "Lorraine, it's here!" A dark, shapeless entity materialized in the center of the room, its presence suffocating and immense. The Perrons screamed as the entity's shadow stretched toward them, its intent unmistakably malevolent. Ed brandished a crucifix, shouting prayers, while Lorraine focused all her energy on confronting the entity psychically. The confrontation escalated as the entity lashed out, shattering light fixtures and sending the Warrens' equipment into disarray. Lorraine reached deep into her connection to the spiritual realm, calling upon every ounce of her faith and resilience. She saw herself standing before the entity in a desolate, otherworldly space, a barren field beneath a blackened sky. "You have no power here," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her heart. "This is a place of love and light. You cannot stay." The entity recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. Ed joined her, holding the crucifix high and reciting an exorcism with unwavering conviction. The Perrons added their prayers, their voices trembling but resolute. Together, their combined faith formed a barrier of light that pushed the entity back. With a deafening roar, the entity was torn apart, its shadow dissolving into nothingness. The house fell silent, the air warming as the oppressive energy lifted. Lorraine collapsed into Ed's arms, exhausted but triumphant. The Warrens performed a final blessing on the house and the land, sealing it against further intrusion. They left the Perrons with strict instructions to maintain their faith and keep the house filled with positive energy. As the Warrens drove away, Lorraine looked back at the farmhouse one last time. She knew their work was far from over. There would always be another family in need, another battle to fight. But for now, they had won, and the Perrons could finally reclaim their lives. The story of the Perron family and the Warrens' courage became a legend, inspiring countless tales and reminders of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. The farmhouse stood as a testament to the power of love, faith, and resilience in the face of unimaginable darkness.